All right. Now take a deep breath. Okay. All right. Exactly, the cleansing breath. All right, well, cool. And then unfortunately, I always have to sit here but there we go. I can look at those. I'm always at a loss if I can't see my screen. But yeah, so welcome everyone. My name's Paul Baylog, and on behalf of myself and Peter, my fellow organizer, welcome to the Mo Reliability Group. As we try to, find topics that are benefiting to testers, developers, and SREs. We want to make sure that we're kind of inclusive to everybody. Hopefully everybody gets something out of these talks. Let's see. Yeah, and then as far as housekeeping, yeah, please do, if you're on the socials and that, feel free to tag us and all that good stuff. Not that we're posting anything on the socials other than possibly LinkedIn, but anyway, but yeah, it can all help and then eventually spread the word, and hopefully we'll get larger attendances and all that good stuff. Even though people don't, so Lake St. Louis area works out well for everyone here, I would assume. Yeah. 3 miles? Okay, perfect. Yeah. So Larry's the only one that's really got the long commute for us. No, actually, I lie. I have the longest commute of all. I actually live out in Columbia, Missouri. So yeah, but I still come out to do these, and actually I come out every Wednesday just to be able to come into the office and actually get FaceTime with people. And I'm still I'm a little bit of a social geek, so I need a little social interaction. But yeah, and as far as our sponsors, for the meetup fees and everything, we're actually being covered by GoBridge. We don't really have anything to do with GoBridge, but by virtue of myself being the organizer for the St. Louis Go meetup and being Go developer and all that good stuff, they have a professional license for meetup, so that was able to make it so that I can do multiple hosting of groups and then get covered by the fees. So that's definitely appreciated. That's it's funded by Google too. So it's like I keep wanting to say it's like $5,000 every 6 months for this meetup account. And it's not just us, it's not just St. Louis, obviously, but it's an international one. So I mean, there's like 300 different groups. But so anyway, they do cover all that. And in NISC, now that I'm back here working again, appreciate them that they're allowing us to use the facilities, and then they are sponsoring the food as well. So definitely makes things a lot easier if we have somebody to pay for those. And then, yeah, I'd just like to throw out there some of the things that are going on, coming up, other events, different conferences and things. But this is one that Peter knows well as also, but he and I were both at this conference last year. Now, this is actually in Anaheim, California, and it's on Disneyland's property. So it's quite a benefit there. But this is a very testing focus conference, and it's one of the premier ones. But they also have Star East, which is like much later next year, but that's in Orlando. So yeah, and then Peter, how many talks are you giving at Star West this year?
3, 2 tutorials and 1 live.
Nice. But yeah, so they do have the early bird pricing up until day after tomorrow. So in case if that is an option for you, but they also do have a strictly online. So you can see all the concurrent sessions via their streaming platform. Also coming up, and this is cool, I just got wind of this one just a couple days ago, but our friends at OCI, Object Computing, this is one of their events that they are sponsoring. This is going to be the first year that they have this, but Forge St. Louis, and yeah, so we get a 25% discount if you want to use that code. I don't know the Q code, if you can scan that all right. I did a copy paste thing. I don't know how well that QR code came through, but it's forgestl.io. So yeah, this should be an interesting event. This is the first time that they're going to hold it. And the price does include lunch, so it's always a good thing. But yeah, no, okay, I was afraid of that. Yeah, because I was, last minute putting together slides and trying to get everybody on here. Anyway, but yeah, it's a reasonable thing. But it is a 1 day only. But definitely check it out. OCI is one of our sponsors for some of the other meetup groups, and we use their facilities. So we definitely appreciate and want to support them. KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. This is my favorite conference of all time, one of them. But I will be going to this, so hopefully might see other folks there. But that's coming up November 12th through the 15th in beautiful Salt Lake City. That'll be my first time there. But again, I am a CNCF ambassador, so I do have the ability to give out the code there for discounts. So definitely check it out. This is an event that it can be overwhelming. It's probably about 10 to 12,000 attendees usually each time. European version is much bigger actually now. Just this year, I think it surpassed the North America. But it's good stuff. It's definitely a good idea to go to. Yeah, anything else? I mean, is there anything anybody wants to bring up? Any kind of job opportunities or events that I skipped on my Google search? My Google foo maybe wasn't good enough. They do, KCDC, and that was just last month. And I did go to that. That's an awesome conference. I cannot recommend it highly enough. And from here, it's only what, 3.5 hour commute over there to get to it. But very much worth it. They're already selling tickets for next year. I opted to not put it on here because it's for August of next year. So it's a little too much lead time. But definitely, it is a very good conference. I highly recommend going to that one. And that one covers, again, the gamut of all kinds of technology, anything that's in there. And then that's all I've got then. So I will let Larry, our first presenter, go ahead and get situated here.
Okay, so thanks all of you for joining, and let me quickly introduce myself. So I'm Péter Földházi, originally from Hungary, and I moved here to the States 5 years ago. Been here in the Lake St. Louis and St. Charles County area ever since. And I'm working for EPAM Systems, and for more than 12 years now, so been a while now. And at the EPAM, I've been working as a quality architect since the last 4 years. And before that, I was a test automation engineer. So referring back to the previous presentation, so I'm the lazy guy. And I can very much relate to that. So I come from the testing and from development part as well. So I was a .NET developer for a while. And I was a tester for the game Dota and Dota 2 for 6 years. So I also had that kind of like going deep and trying to find like weird crashes and weird edge cases or balance issues. And so that's a very interesting mix of both places or both spaces, being a developer and a tester. So how I'm thinking about test automation, that's somewhere in between. And I think I will be able to show that with that presentation, how that combined mindset of being a developer and being a tester can help you be a little bit more effective in test automation. Okay, so hopefully the design patterns is not going to be new for this audience. Still, nonetheless, I will just go through some of these topics here to make sure that I'm going to be able to tell you what the flow model pattern is and how it came to be. And I think the facet pattern might be very familiar for some of you, hopefully. This is one of my favorite of the original, of the OG design patterns. And for a very good reason, because in test automation, it's pretty useful. And basically, all of the popular test automation specific design patterns are building on top of the facade pattern or the idea of the facade pattern. And so what it is about, you have a service, you don't really care about like how it's implemented, you just want to use it. So you are not going into the implementation details, you need to be able to access it. Or someone needs to be able to access what you are building. They are not interested in what you are building. So you provide basically a service for them. And in testing, the first kind of test automation pattern, the page object pattern, does that exactly. So your tests may not be interested in how you locate elements and how the structure of your application looks like. What you are interested in is being able to get connected to your browser and be able to communicate with those different elements on different pages. So basically, you provide that kind of service with the page object pattern. And this is something that was, like the idea was born in the early 2000s. So it's been there for a long while now. And the idea of the flow model was born several years later, in 2013. And that was when I was working on a test automation solution for an iOS application. And so I was leveraging the page object pattern in making sure that I can maintain my test automation code easily. But somehow it didn't feel natural for that specific case. For iOS at that time, we realized that you can actually use the accessibility labels, or better, the accessibility identifiers for test automation purposes. So basically, just like as if it was an ID for testing. And then I realized that basically I can leverage them kind of like in a page object way. Of course, not entirely, not that approach. But I felt that I didn't need the page objects anymore. But I still wanted to make sure that I'm able to save some time on my development work, and especially on the maintenance work. So I realized that I have several actions, user actions, that I'm reusing in multiple different places, multiple different test scripts. And some of them, I concatenate them into complex scenarios. So, and I'm reusing them. Just like very typical example, login, a successful login scenario. So maybe you have to log in 50 times, and that's your prerequisite for most of your test cases. You don't want to copy-paste a change into 50 different test scripts, right? So you are going to have a facade, a service, that will provide you a successful login. And that's the idea behind the login the flow model pattern. You provide user flows, and you provide user steps, user actions. But more to that later. So let's go deep dive a little bit more with the page object pattern. So if you look at this code snippet over here, and you look at it for the first time in your life, are you going to be able to tell what exactly is going on here? Like, probably you take a while, minute or 5 or more, depending on what else you are doing. Are you watching a YouTube video in the meantime, or brewing some coffee? So yeah, you look at it, you right away see that there's some logging going on. So you log in probably as Darth Vader with "I am your father," and then you check whether you landed on the right page, your profile screen, and then you decide to just hit on the home button and log out. Okay, so it's just a successful login and logout scenario. So maybe it takes a minute for you, maybe longer to figure out. But maybe you can make it a little bit easier to read. That's one of the challenges that you might want to address here. The other challenge is that maybe you want to make it a little bit easier to maintain the code, because if you come back 6 months later, it feels like fresh new. So you can't recall anymore what you did here. So that's whenever I see someone still doing test automation like this, and I'm not pointing to any no-code, low-code people, but that's how it feels sometimes, especially the low-code. I'm not too satisfied. OK, so that's when the page objects come into the picture. And I think on this left side, it's already looking much better. So if you're leveraging the page objects, you start pointing to your page models and calling these user actions from those page models. Now you understand where you are and what you are doing there. That's an important information when you as a tester look into this test case. And I think, again, pointing back to Larry's presentation, it's very important. As developer, I still see a value here, but maybe I'm not really caring about like how I implemented it once if it's still working. But if I'm a tester and I look at the code on the right side, it's just like a mind F for me, so that's going to be just blowing up my mind. Looking at the code on the left side, it's much easier, much more easy to understand that piece of code. Because that's closer to what a tester would like to see in a test case, but still not close enough. So, and of course, we will get to the third version eventually. Before getting there, so basically the page objects, the models, the page object models provide you a way to kind of memorize or like store what elements you are going to interact with and how you are going to be able to locate them. And these elements can be many different things: images, buttons, text, and so on. And there are different ways how you can locate them. And of course, there are locator strategies, making it easier for you to find these elements. And that has, of course, an impact on how quickly you are able to locate the elements and how stable is your find element algorithm for that specific element. OK, but again, from a tester's point of view, do I really care about that? Well, as a test automation engineer, I do. But as a tester, the only thing I care about is that it works and I'm able to successfully test or run my tests and see the results. Did it pass or did it not pass? OK, going onwards. So this is where the more of the tester's mindset started coming in for me 11 years ago. And so I wasn't fully satisfied with how the tests looked like when I was following the page object model. And I wanted them to look more like actual test cases that I was defining before in my previous project and at the previous company that I was working for. And that was one of the reasons I came up with this. And unknowingly, I also solved an issue with it breaking the single responsibility. Because when you think about like what responsibilities the page models have, they store locators and elements, in this case, web elements. And they also store the actions and even the user flows. So basically, the concatenated user actions that you execute against these elements. And where do these come from? Well, how you can locate an element, and again, I'm just thinking about web pages. You have the HTML DOM there, and how the locator looks like really depends on, of course, the technology that you are using and how you are developing it. Do the developers provide the ID for those elements or not? If not, it's going to make my life a little bit more difficult. If they do, and if it's possible to provide those IDs, then that's going to be a little bit easier for me. Now, but the control is really in developers or the architects who choose the technology. OK, next up, the actions and user flows are really dependent on the business, either the product owners, but mostly business analysts who provide the user stories for us with the acceptance criteria, but also dependent on the testers who come up with the different edge cases, positive and negative scenarios as well. So what actions I'm going to do against, or like execute against these different elements and different pages. So that means that basically there are at the very least, two sources that have an impact on how the page models look like. So according to Uncle Bob, that means that the page models have multiple responsibilities. Okay, I'm not going to go into the rest because I don't agree with the others here, so I don't think that it breaks the open-close principle or the Yagni. I think Yagni is up to the individual. Like, if you break the Yagni, then it's you breaking it, not the concept, not the page objects. So that's up to you. Okay. So what is the solution for that? For the flow model, okay. I mentioned that these test automation specific design patterns leverage the facade pattern. Here, you can see one facade over the house, the application, and that provides you the structure of the application, and it's called the page object pattern or page models specifically. Now, if you look at the flow models, how I'm depicting it here is a double facade. So first of all, you have the structure of the application, but above that, you also have the logic of the application. And once you are there writing the test scripts, I wouldn't say that you don't care about the structure of the application. Of course, it matters for you. But the most important is what actions you can take as a user. And that's the mindset that you have as a tester. OK. And that really is similar to the state machine diagram. That's how I like to showcase it. You have the different states, the main page, the login page, the profile page, etc. And you can transition from one state to the other through these actions. So those are your transitions in that sense. But you can, of course, make it a little bit more complex. You can even say that I went from the main page to the login page, but I can actually go back. Or I can stay in the same page, on the same page, so in the same state, by typing in my credentials. When I'm typing it in, my username, I'm still on the login page. I type in my password, I'm still on the login page. Once I hit that login button, and if my credentials were correct, that's when I get to the next state. And that's what I want to test as a tester. OK. Any questions so far? All right. Then let me go to an example. So, and unfortunately, you are not going to be able to see the bottom, but that's going to be fine. I can say that as well. This is following the tri-layer testing architecture approach, very simplified way of how to design your test automation framework. And what I like to say is usually you need 2 or 3 layers to really tell how your test automation framework looks like. But I personally recommend having 3 layers because you might want to be able to reuse some of your code in building another test automation framework in the future, maybe for another team or for an absolutely different project. OK, anyway, so in this example, this is an Android example. I have a base page here. Let's see. Yeah. So I have a base page here. And I'm going to be building my base page for these 2 different applications based upon that. And then I'm going to leverage that base page for building the actual page models. And once I have those page models, I can start referring or pointing to those elements through the flow models. And those flow models are going to be referenced the actual actions and concatenated user stories in the test cases. So how does that look like in case of a UI application? And again, very simplified, very typical login scenario that I'm going to be depicting here or showcasing here. First, you have already seen this lovely, well presented set of code here. And this is the linear scripting style. Nothing fancy here. You look at it, you don't really understand it at the first time, what it does exactly. Then, so there are no page models nor flow models leveraged here. But then you create your page models, and again, this is an Android example. So you create username, login button, password, show password, and so on. So you start populating your page models, and then what happens, this is something that you have already seen. Is it big enough, by the way? Can you see the code? Oh, yeah, that's close. True. So here, now it's a little bit easier to understand. So you see that you are clicking around, you understand what you are clicking. So within the toolbar, a layout drawer, then the sign in button, then you click on the username field, type in your username, Darth Vader, and so on. So it's much easier to understand the code now, and you also have increased the maintainability or improved the maintainability of this code. Now let's go another step forward, and let's introduce some flow models. Again, this is a very simplified one. In this case, you basically have just one flow model here, and that's going to be the login flow. Here you can explain how you can open the login page. And that's just one action here. But when you type your username, then you actually have to click on the edit box itself and do the typing. Same with the password. And when you finish the successful login, it's not just about clicking the login button, but also waiting until the profile page loads, and then you validate whether you actually landed there and the right content appears. So this is how the script looks like now. And here, when you check it, you see that it's a login flow that you are going through. You're opening the side menu button, so basically the hamburger button. You click on that. You switch to the login screen. You type your username and password. You click on the login button, so basically you are finishing your login. You open the side menu button, and you log out. And if you compare it, we had this really long test case. We shrunk it down, and we went even smaller. So you have now these three are the exact same test cases from a tester's point of view. It does the same thing. The only thing is that as a tester, when I look at the code over there, I understand where I am going, what I am doing, and it's just so much easier to maintain it because I'm able to make it easier to maintain from a structure point of view, page structure point of view, and also from a user action point of view as well. So the structure of the application and the logic of the application as well are hidden by facets. Okay. I have, oops, that's hidden here, but I've got a little bit. Let me just hide it. But we'll share this afterwards, so you will be able to look at some coding examples as well, like one example how the flow model was implemented. I have a couple more as well that you can find on my Git profile. And I can show you an API testing related example as well. I see that I still have a lot of time, so great. So when you think about the test automation pyramid, and the original one is unit testing, service level testing, and UI testing. The original test automation pyramid by Mike Cohn from 2003. And so I like to slice it up a little bit. So the service level part into API functional testing, contract testing, and component integration testing. And again, like the end-to-end testing, that's an interesting expression because a lot of people think of it very different way, and for good reasons, because even in testing, it can mean many different things. In this case, how I'm using it is I'm expressing an end-to-end scenario that a user can go through. And you can test it through the UI. That's very typical. But you can also test it through API calls and see if you are able to go through a specific user flow and if it's going to work or not. Now, in this case, like previously, if the business logic had some app-based test, flow models, and the page models. That was the example I built upon previously. Now, in this case, when it's about APIs, then you would have some API-based test, class file, that you can leverage for building your API tests. And instead, and let me go back. So instead of the page models, now you have utility classes, because it's not pages that you are going to be testing, UI pages, but you're going to make some HTTP calls, right? Okay. Let's go on. Let me give you one example. So let's say that you have a bank account and you want to test, or well, let's not go from a testing point of view, but a user point of view. Let's say that you don't find your credit card. So you call in, you get your card suspended, but maybe your wife doesn't know that you just didn't find it while she was trying to make an online transaction, ordering something from Amazon. So while she's trying to make that payment, you got the card suspended. So it's suspended now. You make the transaction, so that gets canceled, or at least doesn't go through. Then you start talking to each other and you figure out, oh, actually, I know where my card is, so let's just unsuspend it. You go back, you get your card as unsuspended, then you try the transaction again, and now it should be working. So a valid scenario, at least for a tester's point of view. That's a valid scenario. So let's go look into how you would test it with a test automation solution, API test automation solution, leveraging the flow model pattern. Now, this is a little bit more complex than the login scenario. So you would have an account flow where you can do, for example, logging in with an active user with a valid card. And then you request a suspension of your card. Then you validate that you get actually suspended, make the transaction, validate it, go unsuspend, validate the unsuspension, and do the transaction again, and now it should be working. And then you check in your account balance whether that changed or not. Now, when you look at it again, from this to having a code which is easily understandable and easily maintainable, and you can easily create multiple different similar scenarios. Again, we testers like to go into details. We like to go into these edge cases and many different scenarios. This is exactly what the flow model enables you to do. You can easily concatenate these user actions as much as you want. And you can even have some more complex ones. So for example, when you unsuspend the card, you actually I see one issue here, by the way. I should be pointing to the validate unsuspension and the unsuspend card. So one defect code here. So the validation, you have to validate it, the response code, the response body, the content of the body. You have to validate the database. And maybe you have Splunk or some other similar logging tool, and you check the logs as well, whether everything was correctly logged there. So you have multiple different validations here, but you don't want to write all of them out here. And in case you add a fifth validation, you don't want to copy paste it everywhere. You only have to do that under the validate unsuspension. Okay, so to sum it up, compared to the page object model, so this is not breaking the single responsibility. So that's one of the ways how the flow model is improving on that or enhances that OG test automation design pattern by leveraging the dual facades. Again, making it a little bit easier for you to maintain your test code, because it's not just the structure now that you have more control over, but also the user actions and the user flows. And from my experience, since I've been using this design pattern, I've been able to teach new project newcomers much more easily, and even developers. So we had many new Android developers in 2014. They learned Android for the first time through a 3-month training. And for two of them, the first ever client project was working on the same project that I was working on, but as test automation engineers, because they were fairly new in development. So first, EPAM wanted to make sure that they got some experience in communicating with clients. So this was a little bit easier for them this way. And after a 1-day ramp up, they were able to be productive. So I think that's a pretty big achievement, because usually it takes more time to get someone up to speed. And again, highlighting they were juniors, they didn't work in software before, or not. I think they did have some grades or some university studies, but never worked before, and never worked as testers or test automation engineers. And another thing is the page object pattern, the screenplay pattern, and other test automation specific design patterns are all focused on UI testing. And that's on the top of the pyramid, the costliest tests that you can cover. And people usually try to cover as much as possible there. And probably because that's the easiest to showcase to the business. That's fancy. You run a Selenium test. Oh, it's clicking around. Wow, that's great. And like, they can ask, okay, can you run it again? Like, yes, that's why it's called test automation. So yes, you can. And so that's usually the fanciest. That's why I think one of the reasons, the business point of view. The second is because most of the test automation engineers are actually well, I don't know if most, but from my experience, most of the test automation engineers are coming with a testing background. And for us, most of us, we started with UI testing. At least I did, with Dota. That's a UI as well. And then, for me as well, it was easier to start with UI test automation. Switching over to API was much more difficult. And I believe that's also the reason why the test automation design patterns also were focused on UI testing compared to the other ones. So the flow model also helps with other types of testing as well. I think one of the biggest drawbacks is definitely it needs practice. Like how you design your flow models is not an easy job. And that's where you need that business analyst mindset and test analyst mindset, and the experience with that specific set of applications, or at least the domain. Because if you understand that deeply, that's when you can quickly come up with ideas what flows you will have to cover. And of course, as you go, don't shy away from improving and slicing them up or merging them or changing them drastically. Okay, so that said, thank you very much for listening to this presentation. If you have any questions, let me know.
Köszönöm szépen.
Szívesen. And of course, we will share the presentations, and any questions, I'm very happy to answer them anytime.
Any questions? I got an extra mic here if there's any questions.
I don't like using a mic, but so it seems like the flow model underneath, you're actually still doing the same instructions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you're almost disguising what parts of the test are actually doing. So while new testers could pick up writing a test easier, do you find that they then have a lack of understanding of what the actual details of the test are doing? Mm-hmm. Does that cause a problem?
I think that's a very good thing that you brought this up. So it depends. And now, this is a great topic because now my mind has multiple different topics here that I want to cover. So first, let me try to be very focused on what you asked. So yes, if you bring in, for example, a tester who doesn't have the test automation experience, or especially any kind of coding experience, to be able to build a test automation solution, and that means test cases as well, and that person starts writing a test case, and actually we tried it. I don't think that works, because the problem is that you start focusing more on how you can get the test automation solution working for them instead of focusing on testing the application. On one hand, that's why there are some no-code and low-code test automation solutions. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. There are people who love it, and I'm fine. If they love it and they see the benefit, then let them use it. But otherwise, how I think about it is, I think if a tester who has some coding background, maybe not as much, or maybe not as much in test automation, they still need to learn it. They have the testing background and they know that application really well, so they are able to formulate those flow models better than I do, or someone who is even further away from testing. But that doesn't mean they are okay to just write those flow models and just the test cases. They still need to learn how to use that framework. Because let's say I build that framework so they don't have to build it. That's already a huge help for them. Then I will teach them how they can maintain those flow models and those page objects. Again, it's not rocket science. They can learn it. It will take some time, but that's worth it. Yeah. And then, so I mentioned that adds a couple more topics. So regarding the low code and no code, I think the biggest drawback of following that approach of using low code and especially no code test automation is that you don't understand what you are using and what you are generating, and it's not going to be ideal. So you don't have control over what you are building. And that's, I think, scary, especially as you start scaling. So, yeah, absolutely valid concerns. Thanks.